He thawed his suit and hooked himself back to them. That's what we're working on for the first half hour today. Build up some muscles that you didn't know you had. Learn to use your legs as a shield and control your movement so you can get that spin. Spinning doesn't do any good up close, but far away, they can't hurt you if you're spinning. At that distance, the beam has to hit the same spot for a couple of moments, and if you're spinning, it can't happen. Now, freeze yourself and get started. Aren't you going to assign lanes? Asked a boy. No, I'm not going to assign lanes. I want you bumping into each other and learning how to deal with it all the time, except when we're practicing formations. And then I'll usually have you bump into each other on purpose. Now move! When he said move, they moved. Ender was the last one out after practice since he stayed to help some of the slower ones improve on technique. They'd had good teachers, but the inexperienced soldiers fresh out of their launch groups were completely helpless when it came to doing 2 or 3 things at the same time. It was fine to practice jackknifing with frozen legs. They had no trouble maneuvering in midair, but to launch in one direction, fire in another, spin twice, rebound with a jackknife off a wall, and come out firing facing the right direction, that was way beyond them. Drill, drill, drill. That was all Ender would be able to do with them for a while. Strategies and formations were nice, but they were nothing if the soldiers didn't know how to handle themselves in battle. He had to get this army ready now. He was early at being a commander, and the teachers were changing the rules now, not letting him trade, giving him no top-notch veterans. There was no guarantee they'd give him the usual 3 months to get his army together before sending them into battle. At least in the evenings, he'd have Alay and Shen to help him train his new boys. He was still in the corridor leading out of the battle room when he found himself face to face with little Bean. Bean looked angry. Ender didn't want problems right now. Ho, Bean. Ho, Ender. Pause. Sir, Ender said softly. I know what you're doing, Ender, sir, and I'm warning you. Warning me? I can be the best man you've got, but don't play games with me. Or what? Or I'll be the worst man you've got. One or the other. And what do you want, love and kisses? Ender was getting angry now. Bean looked unworried. I want a tune. Ender walked back to him and stood looking down into his eyes. Why should you get a tune? Because I'd know what to do with it. Knowing what to do with a tune is easy, Ender said. It's getting them to do it that's hard. Why would any soldier want to follow a little pinprick like you? They used to call you that, I hear. I hear Bonzo Madrid still does. I asked you a question, soldier. I'll earn their respect, sir, if you don't stop me. Ender grinned. I'm helping you. Like hell, said Bean. Nobody would notice you except to feel sorry for the little kid. But I made sure they all noticed you today. They'll be watching every move you make. All you have to do to earn their respect now is be perfect. So I don't even get a chance to learn before I'm being judged. Poor kid. Nobody's treating him fairly. Ender gently pushed Bean back against the wall. I'll tell you how to get a tune. Prove to me you know what you're doing as a soldier. Prove to me you know how to use other soldiers. And then prove to me that somebody's willing to follow you into battle. Then you'll get your tune. But not bloody well until. Bean smiled. That's fair. If you actually worked that way, I'll be a tune leader in a month. Ender reached down and grabbed the front of his uniform and shoved him into the wall. When I say I work a certain way, Bean, then that's the way I work. Bean just smiled. Ender let go of him and walked away. When he got to his room, he lay down on his bed and trembled. What am I doing? My first practice session and I'm already bullying people the way Bonzo did? And Peter, shoving people around, picking on some poor little kid so the others will have somebody they all hate. Sickening. Everything I hated in the commander, and I'm doing it. Is it some law of human nature that you inevitably become whatever your first commander was? I can quit right now if that's so. Over and over, he thought of the things he did and said in his first practice with his new army. Why couldn't he talk like he always did in his evening practice group? No authority except excellence. Never had to give orders, just made suggestions. But that wouldn't work, not with an army. His informal practice group didn't have to learn to do things together. They didn't have to develop a group feeling. They never had to learn how to hold together and trust each other in battle. They didn't have to respond instantly to commands. And he could go to the other extreme too. He could be as lax and incompetent as Rose the Nose if he wanted. He could make stupid mistakes no matter what he did. He had to have discipline, and that meant demanding and getting quick, decisive obedience. He had to have a well trained army, and that meant drilling the soldiers over and over again, long after they thought they had mastered a technique until it was so natural to them that they didn't have to think about it anymore. But what was this thing with Bean? Why had he gone for the smallest, weakest, and possibly the brightest of the boys? Why had he done to Bean what had been done to Ender by commanders that he despised? Then he remembered that it hadn't begun with his commanders. Before Rose and Bonso treated him with contempt, he had been isolated in his launch group, and it wasn't Bernard who began that either. It was Graf. It was the teachers who had done it, and it wasn't an accident. Ender realized that now. It was a strategy. Graf had deliberately set him up to be separate from the other boys, made it impossible for him to be close to them, and he began now to suspect the reasons behind it. It wasn't to unify the rest of the group. In fact, it was divisive. Graf had isolated Ender to make him struggle, to make him prove, not that he was competent, but that he was far better than everyone else. That was the only way he could win respect and friendship. It made him a better soldier than he would ever have been otherwise. It also made him lonely, afraid, angry, untrusting. And maybe those traits, too, made him a better soldier. That's what I'm doing to you, Bean. I'm hurting you to make you a better soldier in every way, to sharpen your wit, to intensify your effort, to keep you off balance, never sure what's going to happen next, so you always have to be ready for anything, ready to improvise, determined to win no matter what. I'm also making you miserable. That's why they brought you to me, Bean, so you could be just like me, so you could grow up to be just like the old man. And me? Am I supposed to grow up like Graf, fat and sour and unfeeling, manipulating the lives of little boys so that they could turn out factory perfect, generals and admirals ready to lead the fleet in defense of the homeland? You get all the pleasures of the puppeteer until you get a soldier who can do more than anyone else. You can't have that. It spoils the symmetry. You must get him in line, break him down, isolate him, beat him until he gets in line with everyone else. Well, what I've done to you today, Bean, I've done. But I'll be watching you more compassionately than you know, and when the time is right, you'll find that I'm your friend, and you are the soldier you want to be. Ender did not go to classes that afternoon. He lay on his bunk and wrote down his impressions of each of the boys in his army, the things that he noticed right about them, the things that needed more work. In practice tonight, he would talk with Alay, and they'd figure out ways to teach small groups the things they needed to know. At least he wouldn't be in this thing alone. But when Ender got to the battle room that night, while most others were still eating, he found Major Anderson waiting for him. There's been a rule change, Ender. From now on, only members of the same army may work together in a battle room during free time, and therefore, battle rooms are available only on a scheduled basis. After tonight, your next turn is in 4 days. Nobody else is holding extra practices. They are now, Ender. Now that you command another army, they don't want their boys practicing with you. Surely you can understand that. So they'll conduct their own practices. I've always been in another army from them. They still want their soldiers to me for training. You weren't commander then. You gave me a completely green army, Major Anderson. Sir. You have quite a few veterans. They aren't any good. Nobody gets here without being brilliant, Ender. Make them good. I needed Alay and Shen to. It's about time you grew up and did some things on your own, Ender. You don't need those other boys to hold your hand. You're a commander now, so kindly act like it, Ender. Ender walked past Anderson toward the battle room. Then he stopped, turned, asked a question. Since these evening practices are now regularly scheduled, does it mean I can use the hook? Did Anderson almost smile? No. Not a chance of that. We'll see, he said. Ender turned his back and went on into the battle room. Soon his army arrived and no one else. Either Anderson waited around to intercept anyone coming to Ender's practice group, or word had already passed through the whole school that Ender's informal evenings were through. It was a good practice. They accomplished a lot, but at the end of it, Ender was tired and lonely. There was a half hour before bedtime. He couldn't go into his army barracks. He had long since learned that the best commanders stay away unless they have some reason to visit. The boys have to have a chance to be at peace, at rest, without someone listening, to favor or despise them depending on the way they talk and act and think. So he wandered to the game room where a few other boys were using the last half hour before final bell to settle bets or beat their previous scores on the games. None of the games looked interesting, but he played one anyway, an easy animated game designed for launchies. Bored, he ignored the objectives of the game and used the little play figure, a bear, to explore the animated scenery around him. You'll never win that way, Ender smiled. Missed you at practice, Alay. I was there, but they had your army in a separate place. Looks like you're big time now. Can't play with the little boys anymore. You're a full cubit taller than I am. Cubit? Has God been telling you to build a boat or something? Or are you in an archaic mood? Not archaic, just arcane. Secret, subtle, roundabout. I miss you already, you circumcised dog. Don't you know? We're enemies now. Next time I meet you in battle, I'll whip your ass. It was banter as always, but now there was too much truth behind it. Now when Ender heard Alay talk as if it were all a joke, he felt the pain of losing his friend, and the worst pain of wondering if Alay really felt as little pain as he showed. You can try, said Ender. I taught you everything you know, but I didn't teach you everything I know. I knew all along that you were holding something back, Ender. A pause. Ender's bear was in trouble on the screen. He climbed a tree. I wasn't, Alay, holding anything back. I know, said Alay. Neither was I. Salam, Alay. Alas, it's not to be. What isn't? Peace. It's what salam means. Peace be unto you. The words brought forth an echo from Ender's memory. His mother's voice reading to him softly when he was very young. Think not that I am come to bring peace on earth. I came not to bring peace, but a sword. Ender had pictured his mother piercing Peter the Terrible with a bloody rapier. The words had stayed in his mind long with the image. In the silence, the bear died. It was a cute death with funny music. Ender turned around. Alay was already gone. Ender felt as if part of himself had been taken away. An inward prop that was holding up his courage and confidence. With Alay, to a degree impossible even with Shen, Ender had come to feel a unity so strong that the word we came to his lips much more easily than I. But Alay had left something behind. Ender lay in bed, dozing into the night, and felt Alay's lips on his cheeks as he muttered the word peace. The kiss, the word, the peace were with him still. I am only what I remember, and Alay is my friend in a memory so intense that they can't tear him out. Like Valentine, the strongest memory of all. The next day, he passed Alay in the corridor, and they greeted each other, touched hands, talked, but they both knew that there was a wall now. It might be breached, that wall, sometime in the future, but for now, the only real conversation between them was the roots that had already grown low and deep under the wall where they could not be broken. The most terrible thing, though, was the fear that the wall could never be breached. That in his heart, Alay was glad of the separation and was ready to be Ender's enemy. For now, that they could not be together, they must be infinitely apart. And what had been sure and unshakable was now fragile and insubstantial. From the moment we are not together, Alay is a stranger, for he has a life now that will be no part of mine. And that means that when I see him, we will not know each other. It made him sorrowful, but Ender did not weep. He was done with that. When they had turned Valentine into a stranger, when they had used her as a tool to work on Ender, from that day forward they could never hurt him deep enough to make him cry again. Ender was certain of that. And with that anger, he decided that he was strong enough to defeat them, the teachers, his enemies.